Welcome everybody in the audience and those watching at home to the Sioux Falls Audit Committee meeting of January 25th, 2018. We have a quorum and I would like to call the meeting to order and then entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting of October 11th, 2017.
Motion to approve the minutes.
And second? Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We have a number of items to go through today. The first one is an update on our external audit of our 2017 finances. Keith Severson will be directing that along with Brian Stavanger, right?
Correct.
He's in Fargo, correct? And so if you would go ahead, we'll be happy to listen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name's Keith Severson. I'm a partner with the firm of Ide Bailey here in Sioux Falls. It's my pleasure to just try to provide you an update on the status of the audit of the financial statements for the city of Sioux Falls. I've got a brief PowerPoint, and I'll just quickly go through this, kind of talk about what we have mentioned in the fall when we met back then, to talk about the service team, some of the objectives, kind of our approach, some recent professional announcements, and really the risk. I'm going to walk you through the first couple pages, and then Brian, as Chairman mentioned, is online right now, and he'll take us through some of those final points. Our service team has stayed consistent with the last years, with Brian heading up the actual engagement itself, myself here in Sioux Falls, Courtney Richmond, she's our in-charge auditor, actually in the field, and she was on the project last year and will continue as well, and then the rest of the staff really come from Sioux Falls and Fargo. Just as a reminder, the audit really is a financial statement audit, and our procedures all performed in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles or standards, government auditing standards, and then the federal regulations. And so it's really addressing those three opinions as it relates to the financial statements in its entirety. We do work to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance about the financial statements that they are free of material misstatement. And our procedures in general, as I'll talk a little later here, include an examination of actually the test documents, actually looking at the source documents on a test basis, evidence supporting all of the amounts and disclosures in the final CAFR and the financial statements of the city. We do work with management, go through extensive discussions with the team, as well as evaluating many of the estimates that come into play as it relates to preparation of the financial statement, which includes the IBNR, which is incurred but not reported losses. We look at the estimates that have been compared for the past 5 years. We also work with the actuaries as it relates to the city plan and the firefighters plan for pensions, as well as analyze the engineered reports, et cetera. So really go through a variety of steps as it relates to that. Planning really started at the end of last year's audit to get us to this year, and all of the work really started this past fall, talking with staff regarding the entity changes in the environment, really what's happening with the city and all of the issues that relate to there. But the actual testing started, our first field work got started the week of December 18th. And so we did have staff in town working diligently on that process, and pleased to report that a significant amount of the federal testing was substantially completed at that time, just from a standpoint that we're able to get that work done in a efficient manner and help accelerate the time process. And so we're pleased that all of that is, and we've confirmed all the timing, the internal controls, and a variety of other steps. The actual year-end testing, now that we're in January, the scheduled field work is actually scheduled for next week and the week follow. So we'll actually be doing year-end testing beginning January 29th through the week of February 5th. And we've really worked with, I think, in working on the timeline, just as a major point, now with the chief accountant here for a full year. I think he's just recently gotten past his year of employ as that chief role, and so we've worked with Cody Papke on that process. We've worked diligently with communication with Metro Communications to to make sure they're in line, as well as the Housing Authority, to get those reports brought into the timing of the item. In addition, we've also worked with the pension people as far as the actuaries to get some of that information a couple weeks ahead of time. Last year, that was always kind of the last item that we're waiting for, and that came in. So you can see that we've worked through those steps, and it is our intent to have our report issued by March 30th for the year ended 12/31/17, with an opportunity to bring that final report to this group early in April, whether it's at your scheduled meeting or at a meeting prior to that. Okay, with this, I'll turn it over to Brian. Would you like to just walk the council here through the updates and some other comments?
Yes, I will, and I will try my best to indicate when ready to move the slides ahead. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Audit Committee members, for having us this afternoon. I'll walk you through, as best I can, new professional standards that will be effective or that are effective for this year's audit. There are 5 of them, and the first 2 are really coupled together as one. So 7475, which has to do with post-employment benefits other than pensions. 80, which has to do with blending requirements for certain component units. That would be external entities that have some sort of relationship with the city, and determining if those need to be included or not within the city's financial statements. 81, addressing irrevocable split interest agreements, really has to do with investments that are held by outside entities. In this case, the Sioux Falls Area Community Foundation holds 4 endowment funds for the benefit of the city, and this new GASB just analyzes and assesses whether those should be recorded and reported within the city's financial statements. And then the final one, GASB 82, another pension-related item, nothing significant there, more of a disclosure item. So we're working our way through those 5 items with the city. Actually addressed one of them earlier this week, that irrevocable split interest agreement, determined that those would not be recorded on the financial statements. Really the main one here is GASB number 80, the blending requirements for certain component units. So as Keith mentioned, as we plan every year, we communicate with Metro Communications and the Housing Authority to make sure that those audits are going smoothly and those reports will be issued timely, because those are considered component units of the city and are included in the financial statements. We're reassessing now the relationship with several other potential component units, things like Washington Pavilion, Ovations Food Services, Sioux Area Metro, those types of entities, which we've always assessed, but these new rules really require us to assess it again. The city is going through that assessment right now, and we will consult with them when they finalize those. The impact on that would really be inclusion in the financial statements. From an audit standpoint, not a lot of extra work that we are going to have to do. It's really going to be on the city and city management to get those included in the financial statements. So we'll continue to assess that and let you know the results of that when we revisit you in April with the final financial statements. The last 3 slides, if we go to the next slide, the last 3 slides have to do with risk assessment. And this is really just bringing to your attention our assessment of risk on several different financial statement areas, just so you have an understanding of where we are going to spend the majority of our time. And really just wanted to provide this to you so you are aware of it. And then if you have any feedback, doesn't necessarily have to be immediately at this meeting, but as you're looking through those, slides 8, 9, and 10, all talking about risk assessment, there's areas on there where you think to yourself, I think I would like the external auditor to spend a little bit of extra time in, for example, capital assets. When there's a big capital project, we want you to look at this. So really just there, again, for your education and awareness, and if you have any ideas or any requests on where you would like us to spend some extra time, always open to those suggestions throughout the planning process of the audit. And then that would take us to the very last slide, which would allow for any questions about the status of the audit and the audit process.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that update. And are there any questions from the committee? I have one. On your slide of recent and new professional standards, the first bullet point there, post-employment benefit plans other than pension plan. Would that be something along the lines of the, is it $40 a year per month we're paying for health insurance to employees that are retiring?
I believe that is. Yes, that's correct.
Make sure that we're doing it. Hey, pick that up, huh?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, not too bad for an old business administration major. So that's the kind of thing I just wanted to make sure I was thinking along the same lines.
Yep, that's what 401H addresses, correct.
Super. Okay, well, thank you very much. I believe we don't have any other questions, and we'll look forward to seeing you probably in April sometime for a meeting and with our final report.
We appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to update you.
Or you can get a hold of us.
You bet. Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, next order, our next item on the agenda is Audit Report 1705, Maintenance of Administrative Instructions.
The first part of this report will be presented by Abby. We did work together on this, and I will follow up with the end.
Good afternoon. The Maintenance of Administrative Instructions audit was included on the 2017 Annual Audit Plan. The purpose of the audit was to review the policies and procedures as well as the executive orders established by the City of Sioux Falls to ensure they are maintained, accurate, and up to date. In addition, this audit included researching and reviewing industry-leading practices to determine if there are any policies and procedures not currently in place by the city that are deemed necessary. To give you a little background on this audit, the city charter and ordinances grant authority to the mayor to prescribe rules and regulations dealing with the administration of the city through executive orders. Executive orders are developed by various city departments and reviewed by Human Resources, Finance, and the City Attorney's Office prior to being signed by the mayor. Executive orders are one piece of the city's system of established internal controls. Any city department that determines an executive order is needed may write and submit a draft that is signed by the department's director. Policies and procedures are internal documents that are specific to the day-to-day operations of individual departments. They are written by department staff and approved by the department's director. Each department is responsible for writing, approving, and maintaining their own policies and procedures. The city does not currently have a centralized process in place for maintaining written policies and procedures. Policies and procedures are another piece of the city's overall system of internal controls and are meant to guide employees and the departments. The objectives of this audit were to determine if the City of Sioux Falls policies and procedures are maintained, accurate, and up to date, and also identify areas where written policies and procedures are not in place but deemed necessary according to leading practices. The scope of this audit included a review of the City of Sioux Falls executive orders and departmental policies and procedures that were in place as of June 30th, 2017. It's important to note that the departmental policies and procedures that were gathered include only those that address the following internal controls: segregation of duties, authorization and approval, reconciliation and review, physical security, access, management oversight, and critical job functions. Our audit work is listed on page 3 of our report. This report and its conclusions are based on information taken from judgmental samples of executive orders in addition to departmental policies and procedures. This does not represent an examination of all executive orders or all policies and procedures of the City of Sioux Falls. Our results: we interviewed management, reviewed a sample of executive orders and written policies and procedures, and researched best practices for policy maintenance. We identified the following best practices for policy maintenance. Policies should be consolidated, maintained, and managed in a centralized location. Policies should be kept current and changes should be communicated timely. Policies should have an official custodian. Employees should attest to policies and procedures that guide their job duties. Regarding executive orders, our testing found that executive orders are accurate, up-to-date, and regularly maintained, with minor exceptions as listed on page 4 of our report. Just a couple of notes. Our executive orders are housed on Insight, which is a centralized location. There is a distinct review and approval process regarding the city's executive orders. That being, the department that develops the executive order is responsible for reviewing and updating the document annually. All updates are reviewed and approved by Human Resources, Finance, and the Attorney's Office. We want to reiterate this is a positive result for the city. Regarding departmental policies and procedures, we found that internal policies and procedures are accurate and up to date, with a few exceptions as noted on pages 4 and 5 of our report. Just a couple notes regarding policies and procedures. Policies and procedures are stored in different areas. Some departments store their policies and procedures on their own shared site and Insight, and some departments store them on their department's shared network drive. In both situations, employees must be granted access to be able to view them. Also, there is currently no overarching procedure for maintaining departmental policies and procedures. Each department is ultimately responsible for their own maintenance responsibilities and maintenance schedule. Maintenance of policies and procedures vary widely across all departments. We do have one recommendation and 2 opportunities for improvement that address these results that I just discussed. Our recommendation, we recommend the city establish and document a plan for managing approval, issuance, and revision of internal policies and procedures. This should include defining a custodian at the departmental level, requiring scheduled reviews that are dated and initialed to demonstrate completion, and requiring policies to be maintained in an easily accessible centralized location. Management's response, we agree with the recommendation made in Internal Audit Report 1705, and the expected date of implementation would be the end of 4th quarter 2018. I'll go over 2 of the opportunities for improvement. The first being the city management should continue to work toward documenting in writing policies and procedures that guide specific job roles in the organization. Additionally, policies and procedures should be consolidated as much as practicable to eliminate duplication or unnecessary documents. Management should also consider adding an attestation section to the employee performance evaluation to obtain annual certification from employees that they have been trained and understand departmental policies, in addition to the certification that they have reviewed the executive orders identified in the policy review checklist. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kim to go over the last part of the audit.
I'll be reporting on the results of Objective 2 of the audit, which was our comparison of the city's policies and procedures to leading practices. The Government Finance Officers Association, better known as the GFOA, represents public finance officials throughout the United States and Canada. Their mission is to promote excellence in state and local government financial management, and they provide best practice guidance to more than 19,000 members, including federal, state, and local finance officials. The GFOA publishes best practices that identify specific policies and procedures that contribute to improved government management. From that list of best practices, we identified 22 policies that we believe government should have in place. We determined that our city has adopted those 22 policies, and they are documented through a combination of methods, including city ordinances and resolutions, executive orders, internal policies and procedures, and notes to the city's CAFR. The majority of the policies identified as necessary were financial in nature, and we did find that our city demonstrated good financial management practices that have a strategic long-term approach to financial management. These formal policies are key because they promote the stability and continuity, manage risks, as well as define a shared understanding of how the city will manage its resources to provide the best value to our community. The GFOA also recommends governments establish policies and procedures that encourage and facilitate the reporting of fraud, abuse, and questionable practices. The city does have a fraud hotline for reporting these matters and has provided ethics training in the past. However, we do feel this is an area where there is an opportunity for improvement. That is noted on page 6 of our report. Internal Audit is suggesting that the city consider providing a formal ethics training to all employees on a recurring basis. The last citywide ethics training was conducted in late 2007, and we believe that should be done more on a 3 to 5 year basis. Additionally, the city's fraud hotline should be more publicized on the city's intranet so that all employees are aware of how to report fraudulent, illegal, or unethical activities. And that is something that I will be working directly with media services to get implemented. In conclusion, in order to perform this audit, we did require the assistance of every department in the city. We gathered hundreds of documents that we chose our sample from. And we really do want to reiterate that this is a positive result. We determined the city has done a good job of developing, documenting, and maintaining accurate and up-to-date policies and procedures and executive orders. And the one recommendation we made and the opportunities for improvement we identified during the audit will only help make the maintenance of those documents more efficient and structured, which will ultimately benefit the day-to-day operations of our city. And we would like to say thank you to all the departments that helped us out, as well as the city clerk for their assistance provided during the audit.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilor Neitzer.
First of all, I'd like to say that I wholeheartedly concur with the recommendation to have an ethics training. We have a yearly ethics training where I work, and we have to take a test. We have to certify that we've read all these things. And in our case, we have a lot of federal contracts, and we do work with foreign governments. And so, you know, if we're to do things improper, we could lose the ability to bid on federal contracts. And so we take that really seriously, and I think it would behoove the city to have that for their employees too, an ethics training that's appropriate. So that's good. Is there, so it sounds like things were scattered around. Do departments have like a operations or a policies manual, as it were, whether it be electronic or all together, or is it just maybe just a bunch of documents in a folder on a shared drive? Or
Go ahead.
You know, they're kind of scattered all over the place. We gathered some from the directors themselves. We gathered some, like, for example, police and fire have their own insight sites that their employees would need to be granted access to. And then some policies and procedures were on the shared network drive. So the director had to grant access to us to gather those policies and procedures. So there's no like overarching like policy on how they maintain their policies and procedures.
Yeah, so it sounds like that recommendation to get more consistency is a good one. The other thing is you talked about the scope of what policies you looked at, and so could you just clarify for me? And I'm just going from, I'm not picking on them, but I just know the planning and zoning the best. As an example, inside of their ordinance, it gives the director the power to make interpretations, and he can write policies, but they have to be in writing. Would your scope would that have included like their interpretive bulletins and things like that, or is that only, or is that outside of the scope? I'll give you an example. Like for example, in the ordinance it says hard surfacing of a parking lot. And so there's an interpretive bulletin that tells what hard surfacing is. So the director there's a written bulletin that says hard surfacing is, you know, rocks and concrete and asphalt, for example. And that's actually a binding document that the zoning enforcement people will use to enforce the regulations, and that's a policy directive. Was that sort of thing included?
That would not have been included. It was more so like internal controls,
Okay.
Things relating to like cash or essential job duties and those types of things.
Okay. I only mentioned it because I've always been curious when it comes to things like that where, and that happens in a lot of departments. The parks director has the authority to make a lot of interpretive decisions, and there might be policies and, you know, where are they kept? Are they kept in one location? Are they accessible? And things like that. So it's just a curiosity. Thanks.
Councilor Kiley.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I may have identified an error on page 4 under results, executive orders, third bullet down under executive orders on page 4, it reads, of the 137 total executive orders, 25, 18% documents are more than 5 years old, and 31, 41% documents more than 10 years old, according to the dates listed on the footers located on each document. According to the table on page 3, you would have 5 to 9 years old, 25 of 137. That is correct, and that's 18%. So I would recommend that that third bullet be changed. Documents are more than 5 to 9 years old, because otherwise everything is going to be older.
I see what you're saying. Otherwise, they should add together.
And then,
Correct.
and then
Okay.
to get
We'll correct that.
to get the 41%, it appears that you added the two categories, 5 to 9 years old and 10 plus years old, in order to reach a 41%. The actual number of documents that are older than 10 is 23%, according to your data chart on page 3.
Thank you. We'll make that correction before we
You bet.
finalize.
Anything else? Just a quick note, Councilor Erpenbach and I, when we first joined the council, took a significant amount of time, and she did much more than I did, but she took a significant amount of time going through executive orders because we had tons of them. And we literally printed them all out, put them up there, sat with the city attorney and said, this one makes no sense, it's from 1902, you know, that kind of thing or something. And we kind of cleansed all that stuff, so we're down to the amount that we have now. And so I'd like to thank her for some of the work that she's done over the years to make this a little bit easier in the long run. And the ones that, and then, of course, the council voted on which ones were kind of tossed and no longer relevant. And so we did that. The other thing that I wanted, the results, when you get the results, Kim and Abby, I see that Director O'Toole has kind of signed off as a person responsible for implementing recommendations. How about the opportunities for improvement? Are those included in the, with his kind of responsibility to get done?
They are not. Our opportunities for improvement are suggestions we make to management, but not necessarily a formal recommendation that we follow up on. We have discussed these and will continue to discuss them. Again, I will take care of the third opportunity for improvement myself and work with Director O'Toole and the city attorney to get the ethics training set up. It will be Director O'Toole's decision on whether we can add that attestation section. He wasn't 100% sure how we were going to accomplish that, but I know he was on board with that. And the opportunity for improvement, the first one, is just something organization-wide that we just need to be cognizant of.
Yeah, in here I kind of got a sense that there should be kind of one person in charge for the whole city of making sure that this is, that these are up to date all the time. Will that be, that'll be conveyed to the mayor, I would assume, and for looking for maybe assigning that responsibility to someone?
And we can convey that when we present the report to the full council. I'm not sure we have someone in the capacity to take on that role right now. That'd be an administrative decision or a council decision to.
Right. But I think it would be important to present that to the mayor as part of this so that he knows it, and we're kind of covered here so that we know that that's something that we should be doing. Okay, anybody disagree with that? Okay. I would entertain a motion to accept the audit number 1705, maintenance of administrative instructions.
Move to approve.
And a second? Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is 1707, audit report, waiver of fees and fines. Is this the one where we get all of our fines taken care of?
This report will be presented by Ashley. I think we're just waiting for it to come up on the screen.
Okay, good afternoon. The purpose of this audit was to identify how much revenue is foregone annually due to fees and fines being waived and to determine how those decisions are made. For some background information, as part of the city budget process, the City Council approves a fee schedule to establish the charges for various goods and services that are offered to the public, and they also approve the amount set for various fines and penalties that are charged to the public for violations of city ordinance. In 2016, the city generated approximately $99 million in various fees and fines. Since this amount is financially significant, it's crucial that the city is mindful of how much revenue is lost due to waiving fees and fines. If the process is not properly administered, the potential for lost revenue increases, and it may be difficult for the city to make accurate budget projections. The table on the top of page 3 shows where approximately 90% of the total fee and fine revenue came from in 2016. So, for example, in the water fund, the city collected about $35 million in fees for water services. The main objectives of this audit were to determine how much city revenue is foregone annually due to fees and fines being waived, to determine if the city effectively administers fee and fine waivers, and to determine if adequate internal controls are in place to prevent unwarranted waivers of fees and fines. The scope of this audit included fees and fines waived during 2016 and 2017, and only those that were applicable to the top 10 largest revenue accounts for fees and fines. So in other words, we only looked at fees and fines that could potentially be waived within the 10 accounts that are shown in the table on page 3. For the results of the audit, we did not have any audit recommendations. What we determined during this audit is that there's not an excessive amount of fees and fines being waived. We found that it's not a common practice for departments to waive fees and fines except under management approval or under instances that are allowed by city ordinance or executive order. City ordinance gives department directors and management the authority to waive fees and fines or offer reduced rates under certain programs or under certain circumstances or for specific programs. For example, planning and building services can waive fees for building permits and inspections for specific nonprofit organizations. The landfill can waive tipping fees for community enhancement projects, and Parks and Rec is authorized to offer free swim passes or reduced rates to low-income families for usage of the city aquatic facilities. We estimate the amount of revenue foregone to be $863,000 during 2016 and $776,000 during 2017. Since the departments were able to provide us with this information, we then know that they are tracking and overseeing waivers and reduced rates of fees and fines. We also determine that they are maintaining proper support and approvals when necessary in order to justify why they waived or reduced a fee or fine. To conclude, we determined that only about 1% of the total amount of revenue generated from fees and fines is foregone annually due to authorized waivers and reduced rates. The city departments have an appropriate system in place to effectively administer waivers and reduced rates. Knowing the amount of fees and fines waived or reduced allows the city to see the impact of waivers and reduced rates to the budget and whether those waivers and rates are effectively adding value to the city. So that concludes my report. Does anyone have questions?
Yeah, Ashley, thank you. Yes, Councilor Neitzer.
Was there adequate record keeping of waivers of fines and fees? And if so, the reasoning behind it generally?
Yeah, there was adequate record keeping. So a lot of the departments have their own systems that they use. So for example, the parking department uses T2 and they track all of their, say, a parking ticket that gets waived, or the planning and building services, they still issue permit for a community or a nonprofit organization. They still issue that permit and it's tracked. It's just that the fee is waived. So they were able to come up with accurate amounts and whatnot.
Okay. And did you find that the regulations, and I'm assuming it's in ordinance, and I don't know if it would be anywhere else, that empowers staff to waive fees? Was it for, I guess, specific objective criteria, or is it a little more nebulous and subjective? I mean, for example, you know, can somebody just waive a fee because they feel bad, or, I mean, you know, I mean,
Right.
what did you find?
And so that's kind of the whole reason we were doing this audit, was to see if, are there a lot of fees and fines being waived, or is it guided by ordinance or whatnot? And we did find that fees and fines are only being waived if it's in ordinance, or if sometimes management will approve like a late fee on, say, an account that's always been on time, or they're always make a payment on time. But for the majority of it was the approved.
Okay, and finally, if a fee or a fine is set in ordinance and it's completely silent on any power to waive it, can a city employee waive or change, or they have to hold to that? Does there have to be empowering legislation that would say somebody has a power to reduce or waive?
I wouldn't say there would have to be an empowering legislation, but I think that keeps a control around it so that we're not having excessive fees and fines being waived.
They would be less likely to if it doesn't stipulate that?
Right.
Okay.
And we found that it's not common for departments to waive any type of fee
Okay, thank you.
unless allowed by ordinance.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Arnie, anything? Okay, thank you very much, Ashley. Good job. I would entertain a motion to accept the Audit Report 17-07, waiver of fees and fines.
So moved, Nitzert.
Second? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next on the list is the follow-up audit recommendations.
I think Abby has this up now. The city's internal audit charter does require that we follow up on the status of our past audit recommendations, and that's also required by our professional standards for internal auditing that we adhere to as well. I did put this in a one-page format for you guys this year versus a narrative report. And just the highlights of this are, we focused on our 2016 audits and following up on those. We did make 12 recommendations. All of those were agreed to by management, and we did note that 75 of those have already been implemented within 1 year.
75%.
75%, sorry. The two at the top here for the citywide cash audit, we actually had a date of implementation through the end of 2017, so those are in progress. We will follow up on those in the first quarter here, 2018. And then we had one on our information technology audit that was a recommendation to kind of beef up the password policy requirements to a minimum of 10 characters and to use strong passwords. And that one is not yet implemented due to some software limitations that they are hoping will be taken care of here first quarter of 2018. And then with the new software, they will be able to implement that. The rest of them are listed here. I'm not going to read them all to you, but would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Question by the committee. Hearing none, we will move on. I want to congratulate the city and the directors for implementing these in a timely manner and working with us to make sure that we get these, the ones that are not implemented yet into practice, because it's important to keep that safe and secure, let's put it that way. Okay, our 2018 annual audit plan.
Right, and I'm going to have Abby pull up the what we call our audit universe. This is kind of the starting process we use when we make our annual audit plan, and this graphic shows you the areas that we have audited within the last 5 years and then what we plan to audit for 2018. A few things go into this. You know, we do look at trying to cover all the various areas of the city, but obviously we don't have the manpower to do that every year, so we have to prioritize and assess risks. And we do take input from not only City Council and Audit Committee, but also from administration. We send out an annual survey asking for suggestions on areas that they would like us to look at and take that into consideration as well. So with that, we'll take a look at the 2018 plan. We do have, oops, let her catch up with me here. We do have several carry-forward projects from 2017, which are currently in process. They're listed at the bottom of the page.
Excuse me, Abby, could you make that, any way to make that bigger so people can see it? And I know it's even small on our screens. Work your magic, Jim. Very good.
So we're kind of working bottom to top here. Our carry-forward audits from 2017 include our audit of preventative maintenance. And just a refresher on that, that we will be working with facilities management to review the current maintenance schedules and procedures for updating and monitoring those schedules to ensure that as a city we're doing our best to extend the useful lives of our assets. And then we are also have an audit in process of our motor vehicle fees. So we're performing testing on the revenue that's passed through from the state of South Dakota to ensure the city is receiving their appropriate portion of the fees paid for motor vehicle registrations. The other two items that are currently in process are our fraud risk analysis, which we do every 5 years. We had adopted a fraud control policy in 2012 that requires us to do that. And then also our financial condition analysis that we are in the process of, but we wanted to do a 5-year outlook, so we are going to present that at our next audit committee meeting. For 2018, the audits we have planned are an audit requested by management of the purchasing card program, better known as the P-card program. We have an established program as a cost-effective alternative to our traditional purchase requisition and purchase order process. The program is intended for small dollar purchases, which would allow employees to more quickly and easily obtain goods and services they need in their day-to-day operations. And we run approximately $5 million through that program annually. So good to take a look at the controls around that. And another audit requested by management is that we do an audit of payroll focusing on employee deductions. We do process payroll for approximately 1,200 full-time employees and 500 temporary and seasonal employees, and it is one of the city's most significant annual expenses. And again, our focus will be on employee deductions to make sure they are accurate and that we do have internal controls in place to prevent errors. Another audit that was requested by our finance department was for us to look at bank franchise tax revenue. Minnehaha and Lincoln County both receive bank franchise tax revenues from the South Dakota Department of Revenue, and then the counties apportion and distribute the funds between the taxing subdivisions in the same apportionment as the real property taxes. So we're going to take a look at those receipts from both counties and ensure that apportionment is accurate. We're also going to take a look at travel expenditures. We do have, as a city, an established travel policy that provide the department's guidance for requesting and processing travel. The audit will focus on compliance with that policy as well as the internal controls over the reimbursement process. And it looks like we run about $1.2 million in expenses through there annually, so important to look at that. Landfill has requested that we look at their licensing process, which is the process for commercial garbage haulers and recyclers, to ensure that that's efficient and effective. And then also to look, Public Works has asked us to look at the damage recovery billing process that we use for accidents that would cause damage to things like city-owned light poles. The other two items on the plan are audits of agreements for management services. Those have been discussed at various audit committee and council meetings that we need to take a look at these management agreements and add them to our annual audit plan on a regular rotating basis. So we will look this year at the agreements with Great Bear and Great Plains Zoo and add in the other management agreements in the next few years. This audit plan also does leave us time to respond to requests for information, perform ongoing audit activities, continuing education, and to respond to any special requests that elected officials or city directors may have. And we have a process in place for you all, as well as, like I said, administration to request those items. And I would entertain any questions that you would have.
Any questions for Kim? Yes, Arnie.
Yeah, just, I was just wondering on the audits that are carrying over from 2017, was that due to additional requests or the time frame in gathering the information, or what kind of led to those?
More so that was due to staff turnover. We had some hiring and rehiring of staff.
And we also added a new manager
Right.
to get things started. So there was some startup
Yeah.
time.
I didn't obviously take on the role till late January, and then we had to hire backfill for my position and then rehire after that. So
Right.
just a lot of extra time that we didn't budget for.
Okay, questions? Yes.
A
Councilor
couple of
Knight.
things for my benefit to remind me and for the public. In terms of management agreements, as far as auditing of maybe the compliance of the terms and also the financials, what kind of cycle are we looking at to get to those? You know, like the event center and anywhere where we have a management agreement with a third party.
Our intention at this point is I've identified 6 of them, and we'll do 2 per year on a 3-year rotation.
Okay.
So every 3 years we'd be looking at those. And we kind of tried to time them so that we're auditing them midterm versus right at the end of a term or right at the beginning of a term. So for example, the golf contract that we just reinitiated, this would not be the year to audit that. You know, we
Sure.
want to let them get a year under their belt, get into it, and then audit performance.
And what exactly would you be auditing?
It's going to depend on the agreement. I know with Great Bear, we'll look at the operating account. There's some requirements for preventative maintenance. And then there's always reporting and insurance requirements in all of our agreements as well.
Okay, so it just depends on what the contract stipulates. Okay.
Yep, they're
And
all
then-
unique.
I'm sorry. And then for the operating accounts that are either, in the case of the golf course, for example, the private company, it's their account, and they're essentially holding the money in trust for us. I mean, they open up the bank account, you know, for example. And then with the event center, it's our account, I think, or maybe they have, I don't remember whose account it is, but it's our money that they're essentially writing checks out of. Does this include, or will there be audits of those accounts that the money that should be in there is in there and what's coming out and what's going in?
Right, that's the intention. And in each of these agreements, we do write in an audit clause that we have availability to all the books. So we can look at those. We can look at bank statements and transactions.
So would your
anything.
rotation include the operating accounts as well? As part of our, I mean, because like, to me, I see like there's the management agreements, and is that being abided by? And then there's also just auditing just the numbers of the bank accounts.
I would incorporate that into our audits.
You would?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Kim, but I would think they would go into like at the event center, and they had Elton John out there, and they'd look at the contract for Elton John that they had and make sure that that was all paid correctly to him and that we received, et cetera, the tax and the other things that would come directly to the city and the other that would go into the operating fund, et cetera, et cetera. So they not handpick, but randomly pick 2 or 3 or whatever of
We
those.
could do a sample of those,
Sample
correct.
of those kind of thing too, so that make sure that they're not getting taken.
And there's other, there's other things too. For example, we might take a percentage of certain revenues of food, and you might be able to look and make sure we're getting all the money we should
Right,
for the food
exactly.
and whatever it may be.
Yep.
Okay,
That's exactly what they'll do.
great, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? I would entertain a motion to accept this audit report or annual audit plan for 2018 so that we can move it forward to the city council for approval.
Move to approve?
Approved? Second? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next agenda item is the continuing education request. Kim, would you like to brief us on that?
Yes, that is a request for myself and my staff, Abby and Ashley, to attend the Sioux Falls chapter of the IIA Spring Seminar. It's a 2-day seminar that's held here in town. can't quote me on the topics right now. It's usually continuous auditing and internal control related, but very specific to what we do. The cost is $350 each. Obviously, no travel costs incurred, but asking your permission to be out of the office for a couple days to.
Can I have a motion to accept this?
Move to approve.
And a second? Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Motion, yes, motion carries. Okay, next on the list, I'll take discussion regarding RFP for external audit of city financial statement for the years 2018 to 2020. It falls on me to select a committee where the RFP went out on the 12th of this month, and on the February 8th is when the last date to submit. The review will take place the next week, February 12th through the 16th. They may do some interviews during that time. They may do a lot of different things. I've confirmed 3 people. One of them would be Ashley from our staff. Another one, I've asked Councilor Neitzer to head this up as chairman. And then Rose Grant, who is unable to be here today, but one of our committee people, has also agreed to serve on that committee. I have one other counselor who I've invited to be part of that, and I'm waiting for a response. And as soon as that is done, then I can put that out. We can put that out on SIRE, whatever we do, so that everybody know, or people would know who they are at that point. I guess it's not a big deal for them to know at this point. Yeah. Are there any discussion or any questions on that? Okay. Any open discussion? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. And a second from Mr. Kiley. All in favor, aye. Opposed? Motion carries.